Hey everybody, welcome to the Sports in the Mitten podcast powered by Mr. Spots in Ann Arbor. I'm your host, FanRag Sports Michigan and Michigan State beat writer Adam Biggers. And today I wanted to discuss the Michigan Big Ten Media Day preview that I wrote, and that's on FanRagSports.com. You can follow on Twitter at FanRag_U and at FanRagSports. But then I got a couple really good questions, and one that I didn't answer the other day, and this one came from Mr. M. Insider. And so I figured I wanted to start with that one. And Andrew Burris also, he's asked a couple questions. He came up with one, and I feel like it kind of all blends together because part of the preview I wanted to do today on Michigan was Greg Frey. I wanted to talk about running back position a little bit, reference the piece which has some of the general questions. But I think this one's really specific, and I think that the everyday Michigan beat writers are going to be really digging in on this. So. Shaking my head, I had the best question. Sean Michael. Sean, you had the best question yesterday. I hope that you saw the episode where I thoroughly explained the hands-on approach. So I do appreciate that. So I want to start with Andrew Burrows' question. It says, a question for whenever you have your next podcast. Which position battle are you most intrigued to watch for fall camp? This ties into Mr. M. Sider's question of, are we going to see a 1,000-yard running back and a 3,000-yard passing quarterback this season? And the running back part is because, yes, I think that it's possible, and I have a bunch of stats. I spent some time and did a lot of research on this, so I'll share that with all you guys. So the simple answer for that is yes, and I do like the running back battle. I think that's going to be the most intriguing to see who comes out of there as the number one, because Andrew, a lot of people have been talking about Kareem Walker. I've referenced him several times, and I think all the reports coming out of camp. Hold on, Sean Michael. Michigan QB is really fascinating. I don't think anyone has any idea who starts. Maybe Peters or it may be Spade. No, Sean, it's going to be Wilton Spade. So I'll answer that question for you right now. It's Wilton Spade. Look at the graphics. Michigan just tweeted the other day when it's 44 days of football. Who was the guy right in the middle of that? Ball cocked back, or I think he might have been in this position, kind of like on the run. It was Wilton Spade. Wilton is the starting quarterback. I don't know why there's any debate on that. So anyway, I want to get back to the running back question, and it ties in. Like I said, I think Chris Evans showed a lot of potential last year. It was like 7 yards per carry. He did. I'll pull up his stats right now because I do think this is why I think there's a possibility for a 1,000-yard rusher this season. And last year, Chris Evans, 88 carries, 614 yards, 7 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Davion got close to 1,000 yards, 181 carries, 146 yards, averaged 4.7 per carry, and 10 touchdowns. Those are still really respectable numbers, right? And we have to go back, as Mr. M. Sider pointed out, and I think a lot of people have referenced this. We have to go back to 2011 when Michigan had its most recent 1,000-yard rushing running back, and that was Fitz Toussaint. Because if you remember, Denard Smith was carrying the show for a lot of that. And then I think even if you before then, you have to go back to find a running back. It was 2007, and it was this guy named Mike Hart. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but 1,361 yards and 14 touchdowns. And he had a good offensive line there. That was a year right before Greg Frey came back to Michigan with Rich Rod. So that was, because I think, when Frey came in 2008 with Rich Rod. Sorry, let me get that straight. The live episodes, sometimes I'll get a little off track, or maybe I'll sidetrack or whatever, so forgive me. So going back to that point with the running backs this year, I think that it's there, and one of the reasons why is Greg Frey. And I think if you look at Greg Frey's career, he's been very much involved with offensive line run games. I mean, this year he'll focus more on the tackles and tight ends and the offensive line aspect, but he's also going to be the run game coordinator with Jay Harbaugh, who will be the running backs coach. So if you look last year, Indiana did not have great offensive numbers at all. Not at all. I mean, I think they were like bottom of the league, near the bottom of the league in passing offense, in rushing offense, but individually, I'll bring up his numbers. Divine Redding last year was sensational. 1,122 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaged 4.4 per touch, 253 carries is the lead back. So I think if you just look at everything, and I don't want to bore you guys with a bunch of numbers, I'm going to write it all out. I feel like it's easier writing it out. It's easier for me to write it out. But if you look at everything that Greg Frey's done, and he was at West Virginia too earlier, and I believe during his time they had Noel Devine, and I want to say that Noel was a 1,000-yard rusher. So if someone out there knows, or I'll Google it if I'm wrong, correct me. But all signs point to yes, because why? We have Chris Evans, who 614 yards last year, 600 plus yards last year, and he did that on 88 carries. That was nearly 100 carries fewer than what Davion had, and Davion rushed, like I said, for 800 and change. So I do think that the possibility is there. Sean Michael, you're back. Chris Evans has to be the first. Oh, that one disappeared. Something about top 5 break. Yeah, I think it's Chris Evans, but don't totally dismiss Kareem Walker either. I mean, Karan Higdon's gonna be there as a complimentary back. He's gonna be the supporting back, pinball. I mean, we've seen what Karan can do. But as far as the lead back, I do think it's Chris. But I'm not willing to just totally go out and say Kareem is not going to be right there. I don't have 100. I'm about 70% confident. I think that Chris will be the number 1 back. Either way, I don't think that I think it's a win-win situation if you're Michigan, and especially, like I said, look at everything that Greg Frey has done, and he's had all kinds of all-conference. He had a pretty decent pair of offensive linemen at Indiana in the past couple years. Sean wants to know, Kareem's off the field issues are gone. As far as I know, yes. Last year I actually saw him at Mr. Spots in Ann Arbor. He was grabbing a sandwich. As far as I know, yes. Last year it was purely academic, and they wanted him to take time away from football, focus on education, focus on everything but football. I think that was Harbaugh's exact word, something along those lines. He wanted Kareem to focus on everything else and then revisit football. According to what I've heard, and then in the spring, Kareem looked good in the spring. According to everything I've heard, yes, everything's going well for Kareem. So I fully expect him to be in that mix as a top 1 or 2 running back. So, yeah, getting a little sidetracked off there. Sorry, blame that on Sean Michael. Here's one, Jacob Wallace. What are your expectations for the starting quarterbacks? These things disappear really fast. Jacob, actually, if you scroll down, I answered almost an identical question. Michelle asked it at BakingMom14, I think is her handle. She asked that question, and my expectations are for them to pretty much. I mean, you can't replace Jordan Lewis, All-American, one of the greatest corners in Michigan history. Channing and DeMonte. Those guys were great in coverage. Delano Hill, hard hitter. I mean, Jeremy Clark, you can't just out and replace those. But David Long was right there, I think, in the 2-deep discussion last year before he got injured. And Lavert Hill is one of the most athletic guys on the team. I've heard several players say that. So cornerbacks are a huge question, but Lavert Hill has potential being an NFL player, says Sean Michael. Well, I want to see him play in college first. But, I mean, I think that, yeah, in theory, yeah, these guys, a lot of them, had the potential to play in the NFL. Especially look what happened with the draft class. 19 guys, either 11 were drafted, 8 undrafted free agents. I mean, Harbaugh's building an NFL factory over there. So let me get back to the 1,000-yard question and the most intriguing position battle, because that goes there. I think that's it. And one of those guys, I think, if it's not Kareem, or if it's Kareem or Chris, one of those guys will have the opportunity to be a 1,000-yard rusher. I don't have any doubt in my mind. I think the lead back in this offense is probably going to get anywhere from 175 to 200 carries, maybe more. I mean, we saw Noel or Divine Redding last year rather do that for Indiana. I think a lot of that was out of necessity too. They just, if you remember, like back in like the 06, 07, I think 08, I think was when Michigan State just rolled the hell out of Javon Ringer. He had like 300 and some carries that year. So, and they had to, because Javon was really the only option that they had. So I think some of that was with Divine last year. Again, 253 carries, 1,122 yards, and he averaged 86.3 per game. Like I said, it's not like the team stats are blowing you away. And Divine, I mean, a 1,000-yard rusher is a 1,000-yard rusher, but 86 yards per game. And if you look at, the elites like Saquon Barkley and Justin Jackson and Corey Clement, those guys all averaged better than 100 yards per game. So just just to, I guess, to quantify that. But they also did have 25 to 50 more carries. So anyway, back to the 3,000 yard passing. I think that is possible too, because I mean, what we saw Jake Rudock do that. It was the second most yards for a single season, 3,017 back in 2015. John Navarre has a record of 3,331. I've heard Wilton be compared to John. Unrelated to Michigan, would Narduzzi come back if Mark D was... I'm sorry I didn't see her. I think that would be every Michigan State fan's wish. And forgive me, these comments disappear really quickly. I didn't catch your name. I saw the gist of it. If Mark D'Antonio were to leave Michigan State, would Narduzzi come back? I don't know if he would. I think Michigan State fans would welcome him with open arms. I mean, Pat Narduzzi was a hell of a recruiter, built that defense. So, anyway, back to the potential with Wilton. 0 chance on 3,000 yards. One wide. Sean Michael, you're such a pessimist. Is DPJ even slated to start? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's July 22nd. I expect him to be in the 2 deep. I think it's possible. Last year we saw Wilton throw for 2,500 yards. And he was not, at his sharpest toward the end of the season. So I think if he's fully healthy the entire season, I don't think there's any reason to think not. It's not going. I mean, the defense is going to carry this team, but this is still an offense with Pep Hamilton as a passing game coordinator. So I think that opens up a lot of things. But I think if I had to go, which is more likely, a 1,000-yard rusher or a 3,000-yard passing quarterback, I would say it would be a 1,000-yard rusher for the reasons I just stated. Like I said, I mean, Chris, we see a double in carries for Chris Evans. In theory, that's 1,200 yards, right? Sean Michael, Can Bunting, Matt the Destroyer. Finally on time. You're on time. Sean, ask again. Can Bunting something be but? Could you see Matt the Destroyer? Could you see Kareem or Ty Isaac taking more snaps than Chris Evans? Kareem, possibly. Ty, no. But I just said it a couple seconds ago. I'm 70%. I'm leaning 70% toward Chris Evans being the lead back, but don't discount Kareem. Kareem's had a great offseason. He's back on track. Can Bunting fill the void of Jake Butt? Athletically maybe, but I think it's Tyrone Wheatley who's going to be the number one tight end, and I referenced that yesterday as far as just he's got the brawn, the all-out athleticism. Yeah, Matt the Destroyer. I think Tyrone Wheatley will start over Bunting. So do I. And for the reason, he's a big, I think, multi-purpose blocking and everything. Now, when they spread it out a little bit, or, whether it's just to give Tyrone a breather, or maybe they design specific plays for Ian. I mean, Ian's 6'7". I don't know, he's huge. He's almost a foot taller than me. Tyrone Wheatley was put on the watch list for tight end. Yep, the Mackey. He was, Matt. And that just came out earlier this week. I think it was, Wednesday or something like that. So the 3,000-yard passing thing with Wilton, like I said, let me recap that real quick. He threw for 2,500 yards last year. I mean, Jake Rudock threw for 3,000 at Michigan. I think that Wilton in this system would be a better quarterback than Jake would be. And not discounting Jake at all, fantastic quarterback. And I apologize for the siren. There it goes. And I think that's it. We spent a lot of time and energy on that. Now it's time for the Big Ten media preview, Michigan Big Ten Media Days preview. The answer 3K, I did not see it. I'm sorry. Type it again. And if you guys had 3K, 1K, how good the O-line plays. Robert Protzman. Well, yeah, of course that factors into it. But again, with Greg Frey, I referenced his success with the running game, and then also he'll be there with the tackles and tight ends. And tackles and tight ends are very important to the run game. Why is Michigan's recruiting class looking so bad compared to the past couple of years? I mean, it's early. What are your expectations? That they're going to land a 5-star guy every single day? I mean, I think they have a pretty good building block with Charles Thomas. Or are you talking about the 19 class or the 18 class? And I missed that. Charles Thomas is the only commit right now with the 19 class. I'm more focused on 2019. They got most 4-stars of any team according to ESPN. I believe it. But at the say recruiting is fluid. Sean, you're gonna have to tweet me, man. I'm missing some of these questions here and comments from you. And you threw me off there. But yeah, going back to with the offensive line, Greg Frey, look at what he's done. Run game. I mean, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself here, but I think I cited some stats that support that idea. And at the same time, like I said, with his emphasis on tackles and tight ends, I mean, those are guys on the edges, right? And that's going to open up. We didn't really see. I feel like we saw a lot of Devion Smith. He was a good runner between the tackles. We didn't see like a lot of breakout runs. I mean, Chris Evans a couple times. I mean, the jet sweeps with Eddie McDoom, that sort of thing has the potential for big plays. But I'm interested to see if they're going to spread it out a little bit more. I mean, you have to expect some change. Doom, Matt the Destroyer, yep, Eddie McDoom. He will be a force this year too as a wide receiver. So, like I said, I'm having fun. I don't want to repeat all these questions. What freshman is this year's Evans? That's a good question. I mean, if we're looking at running backs, Taylor and Omari Sanders, Kurt Taylor and Omari Sanders, I don't think that those guys will play this year. In terms of the big breakout guy, Donovan Peoples-Jones says Matt the Destroyer. I would think Donovan, Tariq, Aubrey Solomon. Those are, and I know I mention those guys all the time, but those are three guys that I'm really anxious to see play. So, in terms of a big time breakout freshman, I mean, we saw more play last year, right? So, I mean, I don't think we'll see as high of a volume as this year, but I do think that there will be a freshman, like you said, Donovan, Tariq, or maybe even Aubrey. I hope will be a breakout freshman. Matt the Destroyer, right? Ambry Thomas, I hope, will be a breakout freshman. I think we'll probably see more of Ambry next year, Matt, honestly. I haven't really, and I'm going by what I've heard and what I've been told. I know that he had good camp. I know that they wanted to bulk up a little bit. Because you have to look at the size of the secondary. Jacob Walters, how are things looking for Luigi Villan? I do not have a current update on Luigi other than just, you know, the status quo thing. I think that I heard someone ask about it, or mention him when I was at the youth camp, and just, you know, standard, he's progressing, improving. So I don't have anything specific. Sorry. I'm going to go back. Finally, we're going to get to this Michigan Media Day preview. I want you guys to read this. Again, it's on FanRag Sports. I tweeted it out from my account at AdamBiggers81, and also, you know, follow it on FanRag Sports at FanRag_U. These are my major questions. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Is Michigan equipped to beat Ohio State? I think people are going to want to know that. I know fans want Michigan to beat Ohio State. Sean, Michael, Treek, Black, DPJ, Bonafide Studs, something, play over these guys. Yes, Bonafide Studs. And Matt, I'm sorry I missed your comment. Feel free, guys, to type them in a couple times, because they literally stay just a quick little blurb and they fade away. So by the time I see it, by the time I move closer to read it, then it's gone. So I apologize that. Questions I think people will ask. Is Michigan equipped to beat Ohio State, or something along those lines? Can they compete? This is Harbaugh's third year, Big Ten championship or bust. I mean, it's going to be along those lines. And I know the Michigan fans are anxious. 2 10-3 seasons, back-to-back. Harbaugh's 20-6, but he hasn't beat Ohio State. 1-1 against Michigan State, and 1-1 in bowl games. So I mean this is a year I think that people want to see a big win. They want to see a win over Ohio State. I think this is a year that you could chalk up a win over Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State will be much of a threat, but at Penn State game is going to be tricky. At Wisconsin, and I mean really, if we want to get technical, how early do things come together? Depending on the results against Florida, can Purdue be tricky? How do you think the Oklahoma will deal with the new young coach? Matt, I don't know enough about. We did lose to MSU because of fumble snap. Hard to blame Harbaugh. Yeah, no, that was a freak. That was just a freak play. That stuff happens. And Matt, I don't know enough about Oklahoma to give you an informed opinion. So I am sorry about that. Again, back to the questions. Is Michigan equipped to beat Ohio State? And read this. This one seems to be the major question. What's new? While it's way too early to even say one way or the other, it's worth addressing for the sake of being thorough. It'll likely come in the form of can this team compete against OSU among Big Ten elite, something along those lines. Put it this way, Ohio State has lost 3 rivalry meetings with Michigan since 2000, so it'll take an exemplary group of Wolverines to notch a victory. The 2016 team, loaded everywhere, was such a team. Consider the losses, a slight bit of inexperience, and a tougher 2017 schedule. And the easy answer would be not this year. But Michigan won't say that, neither will its players. Some project Wolverines as an 8 or 9 win team, while others see as many as 10 wins. Regardless of how it's framed, is Michigan good enough to win the Big Ten? Question will surface at some point in Chicago, and Arbor will be asked about Ohio State in some form or fashion. I mean, and again, these are general questions. I think that national media, the stuff that we just talked about as far as the really specific with Greg Frey and that kind of stuff, I think that's more of the everyday beat writer stuff, right? So the 2016 NFL draft and UDFA class, the impact of losing those guys, everyone will want to know. Michigan's young player will have 11 games of experience by the time they play against Ohio State. That's true too. That is true too. That is a very optimistic viewpoint, Matt the Destroyer. We'll give you that. But Michigan just lost 19 guys, right? I mean, it's its biggest draft class, UDFA class in program history. How do they rebound from that? How do the Wolverines overcome losing Jake Butt, Jordan Lewis, Ryan Glasgow, Chris Wormley? The list goes on and on and on, right? I mean, it's really incredible how Harbaugh is mocked and ridiculed, but the Antonio sexual assault scandal, national media says no big deal. Sean Michael. We've discussed this, and I'll say this: a former colleague. I'll say I don't want to say his name because if he didn't tweet it, but a former colleague of mine said if it was Michigan, that CNN would be all over it. So I mean, take that as you will. But yes, everybody's going to want to know how they replace this enormous draft class, undrafted free agent. I mean, you're losing grinders like Matt Godin. I mean, Matt was a key piece of that defensive line. He wasn't a star by any means. He would have been a standout, like a more of a primary player, I think, at just about any other Big Ten school, the way he played last year on that D-line the past 2 years. Because Michigan's D-line has been the best D-line in the country for the past 2 years. So, you're missing a grinder like Matt Godin. I think Matt was very important to it. And like I said, Chris Wormley. But you still have Mo Hurst. You still have Rashawn Gary. There's still Brian Monet. Carlo Kemp. People say they only have 5 returning starters, but there are still players that have taken snaps, started McDoom, Evans, Gary. So, yeah, and I think and what are we looking at? Starters. I mean, if they just were there at kickoff or the first series of the game, Sean, you got to send me that one again, man. We're running on 23 minutes. I want to keep this one short. Let me get back to this question. The freshmen, everybody's going to be asking about the freshman class. That's going to be a standard question everywhere for every school. So, Rashawn Gary. Now, this is one about Rashawn, and I want to read this quote. I remember talking to Greg Madison about Rashawn in the spring, and Rashawn, I mentioned this in yesterday's podcast. Rashawn, if Chris Wormley really did rub off on Rashawn in the way that I think he did, and the way that Rashawn describes it, and the way that Greg Madison describes it, then I think that this is going to be a pretty good year for the D-line and a pretty good year for Rashawn. And I'll say, this is a quote from Greg Madison. He's really critical of himself. He listens to every coaching point, and when that happens, you've got a special, special young man. And he leads the other guys by doing that. They see him doing some really, really athletic things on the field, and they watch him do it. And all of a sudden, it's like somebody saying, this is how you do it. He's been a very good example for everybody. And again, I mean, that's nothing, groundbreaking, earth-shattering, ultra-specific there, but it is high praise from Greg Madison. And when you have, when you're a freshman going into your sophomore year and you're the guy that the D-line is watching now, I think that speaks volumes. And I think, of course, we expected this out of Rashawn Gary, right? He's the number 1 recruit of his class, depending on where you looked. I mean, either, top 5 player definitely of his class. One of the best recruits Michigan's ever got or ever landed. Rashawn Gary and Mo Hurst will hopefully keep their defensive line one of the best in the country. Matt, the Destroyer. I think so. When you get that praise as a freshman, puts fear into the Big Ten. Absolutely, Sean. Absolutely. How come whenever people talk about Michigan freshmen, they only talk about DPJ, Nico? What about Nico and Oliver? Well, we saw Donovan and Tariq in the spring game, right? So until I think that there's more, and we'll learn once availability opens up. And again, these are guys that I'll ask about and other people will ask about while we're in Chicago Monday and Tuesday for Big Ten Media Days. So I'm sure that we'll hear more about them. Nico was a guy that, this wide receiver class in general is being looked at Michigan's best wide receiver class ever. So Nico Collins has some impressive high school highlights. Well, yeah, I mean, all these guys do, right? I mean, that's why they're playing major Division I college football. They all have major highlights. Another one is Wilton Spate the starting quarterback. I'm not even going to answer that. Can anyone replace Jabrill Peppers? You don't replace a Nagurski and Heisman finalist. Wide receiver class is one of the better wide receiver classes in the last 10 years. And Sean, I've heard some Michigan fans and people at Michigan allude to that this is the best. So yeah, I mean, definitely one of the best wide receiver class in 100 years, says Matt the Destroyer. I mean, it's certainly up there, right? Can anyone replace Jabrill? The answer: you don't replace a guy who played 16 different positions. You can't. I mean, there's one Jabrill Peppers. But I do think that Josh Metellus and Cleek Hudson, I'm really high on Josh. I know a lot of people are talking about Cleek Hudson, and Cleek's a fantastic athlete, but I'm still going over how, I mean, look at Josh played pretty well in Jabrill Peppers' place, right, during the Orange Bowl. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. Josh played pretty well, and I'm telling you, I know, and I'll say, okay, well, you can't base a guy off the spring game in a couple plays, and you can't base a guy, but this was in a bowl game. 97-yard scoop and go off that botched 2-point. They blocked it, and he took. I mean, I'm telling you, when you have that kind of athleticism, I mean, that was a play that Jabrill Peppers would make, right? I mean, I don't think that every single linebacker out there is capable of making that play. And I know special teams is different, but just bear with me here, athleticism wise. And then I wrote about this last week on FanRag Sports. I think Michigan's going out and getting all kinds of those linebackers, whether they're a Viper or not. I mentioned Charles Thomas. They're talking about him being a Mike or a Will, but he's still extremely athletic. Who will be starting safety? Jordan Glasgow, Jordan, or Cleek Hudson? I think it's Josh Metellus at the Viper. Harbaugh history says they'll be fine. I think so too, Sean. I mean, my early projections are 8 wins, 8-9. I think is a conservative estimate. Only because the schedule is difficult. Let's face it. I mean, they're opening against Florida. That's not a guaranteed win. Although Florida, I'm forgetting the guy's name, the player. They're missing their leading tackler, leading returning tackler. So of course that's going to be a factor. And then the running back Mark Thompson, he tweeted out some things that Michigan fans had fun with, as far as foot off the brake and all this other stuff. And so I think Michigan's pretty motivated. I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan win this game, but we'll get into that later. Matt the Destroyer, Jordan Glasgow did have that 90-yard pick six in the spring game, didn't he? Yes, he did. He did, but Josh Metellus had the 97-yard scoop and go in the Orange Bowl against Florida State. Jordan's really and I'll say this, I remember before the bowl game, we were talking with Don Brown, and Don Brown specifically did mention Jordan Glasgow as a candidate for the Viper position. But again, this was back, pre-bowl interviews, so like December 28th or 29th. The bowl was on December 30th, which was my birthday. So, anyway, Jordan Glasgow has been mentioned. The Glasgow brothers are beasts. All the Glasgows are beasts. Every single one of them. Graham, Jordan, Ryan, they're all beasts. That's one thing I'm going to miss about the Glasgow. Ryan in particular, he told really good stories. I mean, Graham did too. Ryan really told great stories. So, all right, can anyone replace Peppers? And that was it, guys. So read this. I'm sorry, I'm at my deadline. I have a few things to do this afternoon, getting everything in order before I leave Monday morning for Big Ten Media Days. Before I close the show, I want to wish congratulations to Noah Reed, Flint Wolves right-handed pitcher. He's a junior out at Cornerstone in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Excellent kid. He's been on the team. I've been with the team for 2 years. I think he's been with us for 3 years. Excellent kid. He just got engaged to his girlfriend, Allie. I think she was at one of our games this week. I think I saw him leave with a group of fans. Noah, like I said, just a great guy, a great pitcher. I think that he's going to have success. And he's one of those guys that are really competitive, and that you're glad that's on your team. And like I said, it doesn't hurt that he's a pretty good guy either. So congratulations, Noah, and good luck. That when you get to Cornerstone back to school this fall. I think you said you were leaving within the next couple weeks. So again, that key questions for Michigan heading into Big Ten Media Days on FanRagSports.com. at FanRag_U. You can find it on my Twitter at AdamBiggers81. Follow Sports in the Mitten podcast at Mitten Sports MI. We're on Facebook as well. I want to thank Tim and Keith down there at Mr. Spots in Ann Arbor. I know steak sandwiches, wings, waffle fries. I can't wait. Monday press conferences at Michigan are the best. For Harbaugh not trolling people on Twitter is depressing. Anyway, let me get back to what I was saying about food. If you love food, this is a huge bonus if you cover Michigan, is the Monday press conference. They always cater it, and it's like every other week's Mr. Spots, and that's the best to me. So anyway, thanks again for watching, everybody. Thanks for I Love Food, Matt the Destroyer. So do I. Hey, Matt, check out my food and football episodes I did with Matt Godin and Eric Magnuson. They're on my channel. We sat down, we did them live, and we just stuffed our faces at Mr. Spots, had a good time. Talked with Matt right after his deal with the Houston Texans, an undrafted free agent, and I caught up with Eric prior to the draft. And those guys can put away the food, so it was a lot of fun. So again, final goodbye, guys. Thanks. Really appreciate all the participation today. It makes a lot of fun, and wow, 31-minute episode. This one might be our longest episode, longest solo episode ever. So again, guys, thank you, and I appreciate. Oh, one last one. What I don't understand is how Mark Hollis isn't getting more of a hot seat. Jacob Walters. Well, but let's save that, Jacob. Thanks for the idea. We're gonna save that one for another episode. So I want to debate that, or not necessarily debate, discuss it with my co-host Thomas Bendit of Big Ten Powerhouse, and also don't forget, follow him on Twitter at tbendit, BEBEINDIT. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm really getting out of here now. Thanks for watching.